7.3 continued. The last part of this section focuses on problems that contain 4 or more terms. And so the trick to factoring is to count the number of terms. If you have 3 terms, then you factor your problem as a regular trinomial, which is what we looked at earlier. If you have 4 terms, what we want to do is factor by grouping. And normally when you factor by grouping, what you're going to do, let's start with the first problem, is you group the first 2 and we group the last 2 terms together, hence the name grouping. And from the first 2, we factor out the GCF. The GCF is A. Then we write plus. From the second part, we factor out a 3. And the trick here is that what you see in the parentheses has to be exactly the same. And so this part, x plus y, since it's exactly the same, I know that this has been factored correctly, and you need one more step where our GCF is now x plus y because it's common to both terms, and so we factor out x plus y. We need to put it in parentheses, times, once you factor out x plus y, then we just have a plus 3. And now this is completely factored. Okay, next example. Same idea. We have 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. That tells me I have to factor by grouping. First 2, last 2. Take out the GCF, which in this case is 2 times x squared plus y squared, plus GCF A, x squared plus y squared. These are exactly the same, so I know I factored correctly. Last step, your greatest common factor is x squared plus y squared. This is exactly the same for both terms, and so we factor out what they have in common, x squared plus y squared, and then what's left is 2 plus a. And we're done. Last example, 4 terms means grouping. Group the first 2 and the last 2. And let's see what happens. From the first 2, GCF is x, a plus b. Now this one's slightly different because unlike a and b, the second part we have these negatives. And so the trick here is to factor out a -4. And when you do that, we have a plus b. If we don't factor out a -4, we wouldn't have the same sign and these wouldn't be the same. And so since we need to have the same exact 2 terms here, then we needed to factor out a -4. We have one more step, a plus b times x minus 4, and then we're done.